You know that moment when the whole room looks at you, not because you did something wrong, but because they have decided you are the solution? That night, my sister handed me a set of keys like she was casting me in a role. My mother clapped. My father nodded. I just smiled like someone who had already prepared the ending. Because inside my coat pocket sat a thick envelope, not a secret, but the stamped truth. My name is Isla Simmons, and I am 33 years old. If you looked at the deed to the sprawling ranch-style house in the suburbs of St. Petersburg, Florida, you would see my name printed in bold, black ink, but if you asked anyone sitting around the mahogany dining table this Thanksgiving, they would tell you, this is my parents' house. They would tell you I am just the dutiful daughter who visits from the city, the one who occupies the guest room, the one who is lucky to have a family to come home to. The air conditioner was humming, battling the unseasonal 80-degree heat outside, but inside, the atmosphere was frozen. It was that specific kind of family tension that smells like roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and unspoken resentments. I sat near the end of the table, my fingers tracing the rim of my wine glass. I had not taken a sip in 40 minutes. I needed a clear head. My sister, Brielle, sat at the head of the table next to her fiancé, Grant. Brielle has always had a way of occupying space that defies physics. She expands until everyone else is pressed against the walls. Tonight, she was practically glowing, wearing a dress that seemed chosen specifically to hint at a secret she was desperate to tell. The clinking of silverware stopped when Brielle pushed her chair back. The screech of wood against the tile floor was like a gavel striking a sounding block. "Everyone," Brielle said, her voice trembling with a rehearsed vibrato. She held up her glass of sparkling cider. "Grant and I have news." My mother, Darlene, clasped her hands together under her chin. She knew, of course she knew, in this family. Information flowed through a pipeline that bypassed me entirely. My father, Wade, leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips, the kind of look a man has when he thinks his legacy is secured. Brielle looked around the room, making eye contact with everyone except me. Before finally landing her gaze on my face, she wanted to see the reaction. She fed on it. "I went to the doctor yesterday," Brielle announced, pausing for dramatic effect. "We aren't just having a baby, we are having triplets." The room detonated. My mother let out a shriek that could have shattered crystal. "3! Oh, my grandbabies!" She was up out of her chair, rushing to hug Brielle. My father was shaking Grant's hand vigorously, slapping him on the back. "A whole baseball team! Well done, son, well done." "Triplets," I repeated softly. The word felt heavy, like a stone dropping into a pond. 3 babies, 3 new lives, 3 new reasons for Brielle to be the sun around which this entire family orbited. "It is a miracle," Grant said, beaming, though I noticed a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "We are still in shock." "It is a blessing," my mother cried, wiping tears from her cheeks. "The Lord provides." Brielle basked in the adoration for exactly 2 minutes. I timed it. Then, as the applause died down and the cooing settled, the performance shifted to its second act. The room quieted down, the heavy silence of expectation returning. Brielle remained standing. She turned her body fully toward me. The smile on her face was dazzling. It was the smile of a predator that has cornered its prey, but wants the prey to believe it is a hug. "And," Brielle said, her voice ringing clear and loud, "we have even better news, because 3 babies means we simply cannot stay in our apartment. And we certainly cannot squeeze into Mom and Dad's guest room forever." She paused. The room turned to look at me. It was synchronized, like a flock of birds changing direction. "Isla," Brielle said, "is going to buy us a bigger house." She said it with such absolute certainty that, for a second, I wondered if I had missed a conversation. I wondered if I had blacked out and agreed to this. But I knew I had not. "We need to start looking this week," Brielle continued, her voice gaining speed, overriding any potential objection before it could be formed. "The lease is up in 2 months. And with the triplets coming, we need to be settled. I was thinking something in the historic old Northeast neighborhood, or maybe nearer to the beach. My mother clapped her hands together again. A sharp, percussive sound. Oh, that would be perfect. Then you would be just 10 minutes away from us. Think of the help I could give. Isla makes plenty, my father added, nodding at me as if he were approving a loan application. It is the right thing to do. Family looks out for family. I sat perfectly still. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that contrasted with my exterior calm. This was it. This was the moment I had felt coming for years, the culmination of a lifetime of being the wallet, the safety net, the backup plan. Brielle reached into her purse. She pulled out a heavy, glittery keychain. It looked like something a teenager would buy. A giant faux gold house charm with tassels. She walked over to where I sat and dropped it into my open palm. The metal was cold and heavy. It is a mandate, really, Brielle giggled, though her eyes were hard flint. 4 bedrooms minimum. Has to have a fenced yard for the kids. And close to Mom. We cannot be driving 40 minutes every time I need a babysitter. She looked at me, expecting the usual. She expected me to sigh. She expected me to do the mental math, to worry about my savings, to calculate the interest rates, and then to nod and say, "Okay, we will figure it out." She expected the Isla who paid the mortgage on this very house we were sitting in while they called it theirs. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was steady. "Triplets. That is incredible news. Brielle?" Brielle's smile faltered just a fraction. She had been braced for resistance, or perhaps immediate submission. She did not know what to do with neutral congratulations. "So you are excited?" Brielle asked, tilting her head. "I mean, it is a lot of money, I know. But you have that job at Harborlight Analytics. You are practically printing money sitting at home in your pajamas. And for your nieces or nephews, surely you want them to have a yard." "A yard is important," I agreed. I set the glittery keychain down on the tablecloth. It made a dull thud. My mother leaned in, her expression tightening. "Isla, do not be difficult. This is a celebration. Your sister is carrying 3 lives. The least you can do is make sure they have a roof over their heads." "I am not being difficult," I said. I picked up my napkin and folded it neatly, placing it next to my plate. "I agree completely. A growing family needs space, security." Brielle brightened. She thought she had won. She thought the wall had crumbled just like it always did. "Exactly. I knew you would understand. I actually saw a listing on Zillow this morning. It is going for $800,000. But if you put a solid down payment—" "Actually," I interrupted, softly, but clearly enough to cut through her excitement. "I have already found a house." The silence that followed was absolute. Brielle's mouth hung open slightly. My father stopped chewing. You have?" Brielle stammered. A flush of victory rose in her cheeks. "Oh my God. Isla, you are amazing. You were planning this? A surprise?" My mother let out a breath she had been holding. "See? I told you Isla would come through. She is a good sister." "Where is it?" Brielle demanded, reaching for the keychain on the table as if to reclaim her prize. "Is it the one on 4th Street? Or the one near the park? Does it have a pool? Grant really wants a pool." I looked at them. I looked at my father, who was already reaching for the wine bottle to celebrate. I looked at my mother, who was looking at Brielle with adoration. I looked at Brielle, who was already mentally decorating a living room she did not pay for. "It is beautiful," I said. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch. It is in Clearwater, about 45 minutes from here. Quiet, private. Brielle frowned. "Clearwater? That is too far. Mom cannot drive that far every day. And Grant works in St. Pete. Why would you look in Clearwater?" I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer. My fingers brushed against the thick cream-colored envelope. It felt warmer than my hand. "I did not look in Clearwater for you, Brielle," I said. I pulled the envelope out. I placed it on the center of the table. right between the turkey carcass and the bowl of mashed potatoes. It sat there like a white flag, but it was actually a declaration of war. I looked in clear water for me, I said. The room did not just go quiet. It went dead. The air seemed to be sucked out of the space. What? Brielle whispered. The word came out like a hiss. I bought the house, I said, keeping my voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. I closed on it 3 days ago. The movers are coming tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. I am moving out, my mother laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Isla, stop joking. You live here. This is your home. And your sister needs— This is not my home, I corrected her. This is a house I pay for, where you all live. There is a difference. You are being selfish, my father growled, his face turning a shade of red that matched the cranberry sauce. Your sister is having triplets. Triplets, Isla. And you are talking about running off to Clearwater? I am not running off, I said. I am moving into my home. Brielle looked at the envelope, then at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and rising panic. She had never heard the word no from me, not in a way that mattered. She thought no was just a starting position for a negotiation she would eventually win. But the house, Brielle stammered, gesturing vaguely to the room we were in. If you move out, who pays for this? That is a great question, I said. I tapped the envelope with my index finger. Inside this envelope are the transfer documents, and a notice. I am not kicking you out. Of course, that would be cruel. I paused, letting the word hang there. But I am no longer paying the mortgage, or the utilities, or the property tax. I am removing my name from the household expenses effective immediately. You cannot do that, Brielle shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair back. You promised. You said we would always take care of each other. I am taking care of myself, I said. For the first time in 33 years. Isla, sit down, my father commanded, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. You are ruining Thanksgiving. We will discuss this later. There is nothing to discuss. Dad, I said. I stood up. My legs felt steady. I have already signed the papers. The house in Clearwater is mine. This house, well, that is up to you now. You are buying us a house, Brielle screamed, her face contorting. You have to. I have triplets. Where are we supposed to go? You cannot just leave us. I am not buying you a house. Brielle, I said. I looked her dead in the eye. And this house? The one we are standing in? I picked up the glittery keychain she had dropped on the table. I held it up for a moment, letting the chandelier light catch the fake gold. Then I dropped it back down. This isn't something you can demand, I said. And neither am I. I turned to my mother. The turkey was delicious. Mom, thank you. I did not wait for a response. I turned my back on the table, on the shouting that was beginning to erupt, on the tears that were starting to flow. I walked toward the front door, the envelope still sitting on the table behind me like a bomb that had finally, after years of ticking, gone off. 2 years ago, the ground beneath my feet shifted, not with an earthquake, but with a phone call that sounded like a siren. My father, Wade, had collapsed in the driveway. It was a minor cardiac event, the doctor said later, a warning shot fired across the bow of his health. But at the time, my mother made it sound like the apocalypse. I remember rushing to the emergency room, my laptop still open in the passenger seat because I was in the middle of a data migration for a client. When I arrived, the scene was set. My father was lying in the hospital bed, looking smaller and grayer than I had ever seen him. My mother, Darlene, was weeping into a tissue that was already shredded from anxiety. And Brielle? Brielle was pacing the room, checking her reflection in the darkened window, looking less like a concerned daughter and more like someone inconvenienced by the timing of mortality. That was the catalyst. Crisis, I have learned, is the perfect soil for manipulation to take root. In the weeks that followed, the narrative began to take shape. My father could not manage the stairs in their old rental. The stress of the landlord raising the rent was bad for his heart. And then, As if by divine intervention or calculated coincidence, Brielle announced that her lease was up, and she, too, was being priced out of her apartment. The solution was presented to me over a Sunday dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the comfort food acting as a lubricant for the bitter pill they wanted me to swallow. "Isla," my mother began, her voice trembling with that specific pitch she used when she wanted something expensive. "We have been thinking. We are wasting so much money on rent. Separate rents. It makes no sense." She paused, looking at my father, who nodded weakly, playing his part as the fragile patriarch. "We should buy a house," she said. "One big house, for all of us. A place where we can take care of your father. A place where the family can be together. An investment, for the future." The word investment hung in the air, heavy and golden. They knew that word appealed to me. They knew I spoke the language of assets and equity. They were trying to sell me a dream of generational wealth, but what they were really selling was a commune where I was the only one paying dues. I hesitated. I liked my life. I liked my quiet apartment where the only noise was the hum of my refrigerator. I liked not knowing what Brielle was watching on television at 2 a.m. "I don't know, Mom," I said. "Living together? That is a lot of adjustment." "But Isla," Brielle chimed in, leaning across the table, her eyes wide. "Think about Dad. He needs us. And honestly, I can help Mom with him if we are all in the same place. I can't do that if I'm living across town." Then came the hook. "You are the only one who can do this." "Isla," my mother said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Your credit is perfect. Your income is stable. Well, you know our situation. We had some setbacks, but if you help us get the house, we will pay the mortgage. We will split it. It is just the paperwork that needs you." It was the classic trap. Flattery mixed with obligation. "You are the capable one. You are the savior." I agreed. I agreed because looking at my father's pale face, I felt the weight of every sacrifice they claimed they made for me. I agreed because I thought, logically, real estate is a safe bet. I agreed because I was 31 years old and still desperate for them to see me as a partner. Not a servant, the process of buying the house was a masterclass in shifting burdens. We found the ranch-style house in St. Petersburg. It was perfect, they said. 4 bedrooms, a yard, a pool that needed work but had potential. When we sat down with the mortgage broker, a woman with kind eyes and a sharp suit, the reality became clear very quickly. My parents' credit scores were abysmal. Brielle had no verifiable income that a bank would accept. Her work history was a patchwork of gigs and under-the-table payments. The broker looked at the 3 of them, then looked at me. "Ms. Simmons," she said, addressing only me, "based on the debt-to-income ratio, this loan can only go through if you are the sole borrower." I looked at my mother. She was chewing her lip. "It is just for now," she whispered loud enough for the broker to hear. "Just temporary, until we sell the old car, until Dad gets his pension sorted. 6 months, tops. Then we will refinance and add our names. We don't want to drag your score down with our mess." 6 months? That was the promise. I signed. I signed my name on the mortgage. I signed my name on the deed. I signed my name on the promissory note that said I, Isla Simmons, was solely responsible for $650,000 plus interest over 30 years. Then came the cash. The down payment was 20% to avoid mortgage insurance, $130,000. I stared at the check before I handed it over. That was my savings. That was 5 years of bonuses, late nights, and skipped vacations. "Mom," I said, my hand shaking slightly, "this is everything I have. It is not spending, honey," my father said, patting my shoulder. "It is moving money from one pocket to another. It is equity. It is still yours." I paid the closing costs, another $15,000. I paid the first year of homeowner's insurance up front. I paid for the movers, and then, the twist, I did not move in. As the closing date approached, I looked at the floor plan, at the room they had designated for me. the smallest one, right next to the laundry room, and I panicked. I realized I could not do it. I could not live in the same house where I had to hide my snacks to keep Brielle from eating them. I could not wake up to my mother criticizing my outfit before I had even had coffee. So I told them, I will keep my apartment. You guys live in the house. You pay the mortgage. I will handle the landlord responsibilities, but I need my space. They were thrilled. Of course they were. They got the mansion without the roommate. Brielle moved in the first day. I saw it on social media. She posted a video on TikTok, spinning around in the spacious, sun-drenched kitchen. The caption read, "New beginnings. So blessed to finally have my dream farmhouse kitchen. Hard work pays off. Homeowner blessed." She did not tag me. She did not mention me. In the comments, people congratulated her. "You deserve this. Babe," they wrote. "So proud of you." I sat in my rental apartment, eating instant noodles because I was cash poor after the closing, and liked the post. I tapped the little heart. That was my role, the silent backer, the producer who funds the movie but doesn't get to walk the red carpet. The first month was fine. They paid the mortgage. It was late, but they paid it. The second month, the excuses began. It started with a phone call from my mother. "Isla," she said, her voice tight. "The air conditioner is making a noise. We had to call a guy. It is going to be $400. Can we take that out of the mortgage payment this month?" I sighed. "Fine. Mom, just send the rest." The check arrived. It was short. Not just $400 short, but $1,000 short. I called her. "Oh, well, Brielle had a flat tire," my mother explained, as if this were a law of physics that explained the missing money, "and your father's blood pressure medication went up. We figured since it is your house, you wouldn't mind covering the difference this one time. Family is family, right? Since it is your house, when they wanted to decorate, it was their house. When the bill came, it was my house." Brielle painted the living room a hideous shade of sage green without asking me. She bought new furniture on a payment plan, furniture that I suspected I would eventually end up paying for. She hosted parties. I would see the photos online. Thanksgiving, the previous one. Christmas, 4th of July barbecues. I was invited, of course, as a guest. I would drive over, park in the driveway I paid for, walk into the house I owned, and feel like a stranger. Brielle had filled the space with her presence. Her shoes were by the door. Her art was on the walls. She referred to the master bedroom as my sanctuary. Meanwhile, I was bleeding money. Every month, there was a new reason why they could not pay the full amount. June. The dog needed surgery. Brielle had adopted a French bulldog that cost $3,000, which she naturally did not have. August. The electric bill was too high because it was a hot summer. They kept the AC at 68 degrees all day while I kept mine at 78 to save money. October. Brielle was stressed and needed a mental health week, so she missed shifts at the boutique. I absorbed it all. I paid the difference. I paid the full mortgage when they couldn't pay a dime. I told myself it was for Dad. I told myself that if I evicted them, the stress would kill him, and I would be the villain in the family tragedy. But the 6 months deadline came and went. I brought it up once, timidly. "Hey, Dad, about the refinancing," I said during a visit. He looked at me with hurt eyes. "Isla, look at me. I am on a fixed income, and Brielle is just getting on her feet. Why are you rushing us? Are you trying to kick us out?" "No," I said quickly. "No, of course not." "Good," he said, turning back to the television. "Because that would be cruel, after all we have done for you." I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Brielle was there, unpacking a box of expensive organic groceries. She looked at me and smiled. "Hey, sis," she said. "By the way, the pool pump is acting funny. You should probably call someone to look at it. It is making a weird buzzing sound." I looked at her. I looked at the granite countertops. I looked at the stainless steel refrigerator that held the food I bought but wasn't invited to eat. I realized then that the house was not an investment. It was a leash. They had collared me with a $650,000 debt, and they were holding the handle. As long as I wanted to protect my credit score, as long as I wanted to maintain the illusion of being a good daughter, I had to keep walking where they led. I had to keep paying. I had to keep quiet. I was not the owner of this property. I was its prisoner. That night, driving back to my apartment, I cried, not because of the money, though the money was significant. I cried because I realized I had bought a cage for myself and handed them the key. And the worst part? They knew it. They knew I was too responsible to default. They knew I was too desperate for approval to evict them. They had weaponized my own competence against me. But cages have a funny way of teaching you about freedom. You spend enough time looking through the bars, and you start to notice the hinges. You start to notice the lock mechanism. You start to realize that if you are the one who built the cage, if you are the one who signed the papers, who holds the deed, who owns the title, then you are the only one who can dismantle it. It took me 2 years to stop crying and start planning. It took 2 years of watching Brielle play house in my investment before I realized that a leash goes both ways. Yes, I was tethered to the house, but the house was tethered to me. And if I decided to walk away, if I decided to cut the cord, they would be the ones left with nowhere to stand. But I couldn't just leave, not yet. I had to be smart. I had to be cold. I had to be exactly what they accused me of being. Calculated. So I kept paying. I kept smiling. I let Brielle have her farmhouse kitchen moment. I let Mom guilt-trip me about the electric bill. I let Dad play the frail victim. I waited. I waited for the perfect moment when the leash would snap, and the backlash would hit them, not me. And then, Brielle got pregnant, and the snap I had been waiting for finally echoed in the room. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were not filled with the anticipation of turkey and pumpkin pie. They were filled with the distinct, metallic taste of a trap snapping shut. I did not know the full extent of it yet, but the air in the street, Petersburg House, had changed. It was heavy with suggestion. It started in early November. I stopped by the house to drop off a bag of mail that had still been coming to my apartment. Junk flyers mostly. Addressed to my father, when I walked in, Brielle was pacing the living room. She was not pregnant yet, or at least she had not announced it. But she was already setting the stage. "This room is just so claustrophobic," Brielle sighed. Throwing her hands up as she looked around the 300-square-foot living room, she kicked at the edge of the rug. "I mean, imagine if we had a baby. Where would the swing go? Where would the playpen go? It is a hazard, honestly." My mother, sitting in her recliner with a crochet needle, nodded solemnly. "It is tight." She agreed. "Very tight. A growing family needs room to breathe." My father, watching the news, grunted in agreement. "You cannot raise a child in a shoebox." I stood in the doorway, clutching the mail. The house was 2,400 square feet. It was 4 bedrooms. It was bigger than the house I grew up in. It was bigger than the apartment I lived in. To call it a shoebox was not just an exaggeration. It was a lie, designed to reshape reality. I did not say anything. I just placed the mail on the entry table. That was when I saw it. It was a thick manila envelope sitting next to Brielle's car keys. On the front, in Brielle's loopy handwriting, were the words, "Baby Fund. Curiosity is a dangerous thing," but in that moment, it was my only defense. Brielle had gone into the kitchen to get a soda, and my parents were distracted by a commercial. I reached out and lifted the flap of the envelope. I did not take anything out, but I peeked inside. It was a ledger, a handwritten list of names and amounts. Grandma Rose, $500. Uncle Mike, $200. Grant, $1,500. Monthly. There were notes in the margins, things like crib money and stroller fund, but the date on the first entry was from 4 months ago. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Brielle had been collecting money for a baby that did not exist yet. Or if it did exist, she had been keeping it a secret while soliciting donations. But the line that caught my eye was Grant's. Grant, $1,500, monthly. I did the math in my head. $1,500, that was exactly half of the mortgage payment I was making every month. Grant, Brielle's fiancé, was contributing. He was paying his share. But I had never seen a dime of it. For 2 years, every time I asked for the mortgage contribution, Brielle would give me a sob story. Grant's hours got cut. Grant had to pay off his student loans. We are drowning. Isla. But according to this ledger, Grant was paying. He was paying faithfully. So where was the money going? I put the envelope back exactly as I found it. I walked into the kitchen where Brielle was pouring diet soda over ice. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice casual. "How is Grant doing? Is work treating him okay?" Brielle rolled her eyes. "Oh, it is a grind. He's working so hard. But the pay is just garbage. We are barely scraping by." She took a sip, the ice clinking against the glass. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the new highlights in her hair. Likely $200 at the salon downtown. I saw the fresh manicure. I saw the new smartwatch on her wrist. I realized then that Grant's $1,500 was not going to the house. It was going to Brielle. She was embezzling from her own fiancé and using me to subsidize the theft. I left the house 10 minutes later. I did not yell. I did not confront her. I realized that screaming would only give them information. It would tell them I knew, and I needed them to think I was still blind. The next morning, I called Aunt Corinne. Corinne is my father's older sister. She is the black sheep of the family because she refused to lend my father money back in the 90s to start a doomed landscaping business. She works as a paralegal for a high-end estate planning firm in Tampa. She is 70 years old, smokes thin cigarettes, and has eyes that can spot a lie across a crowded room. I met her at a diner halfway between our houses. I brought everything. My mortgage statements, the text messages from Brielle begging for money, the deed, and a written recollection of what I saw in the envelope. Corinne put on her reading glasses. She ordered a black coffee and told the waitress to keep it coming. She read through my papers in silence. She read for 20 minutes. I watched her face, looking for shock, for anger, but there was nothing. Just a flat professional assessment. Finally, she took off her glasses and looked at me. "Isla," she said. Her voice was gravelly. "You know what this is, right?" "It is financial abuse," I said. "No," she said. "It is business." I blinked. "What?" To them. "You are not a person," Corinne said. She tapped her cigarette on the edge of the ashtray. "You are an asset. You are a rental property that walks and talks. You are a line of credit with a heartbeat." She pointed to the mortgage statement. "You are paying down the principal. You are building equity. That is good. But they are living there, destroying the asset, and contributing nothing. And this ledger you saw? That proves intent. Brielle is collecting funds for a life she expects you to subsidize. Grant thinks he is paying rent. You think they are broke. The only person making a profit here is Brielle." Corinne leaned across the table. "If you try to kick them out, they will claim squatters' rights or tenancy. In Florida, that is a nightmare. If you sell the house with them in it, they will sabotage the sale. They will refuse to leave during showings. They will damage the walls. So what do I do?" I asked. I felt tears pricking my eyes. "I am trapped." "No," Corinne said. "You are not trapped. You are just playing by rules they do not respect. So stop playing." She reached into her oversized leather tote bag and pulled out a notepad. "Here is the plan," she said. "First, you secure your exit. You buy a new place. Something small. Something just for you. Do not tell them. Second," she continued, writing as she spoke, "you paper everything. You download every bank statement for the last 5 years. You screenshot every text message where they ask for money or admit they cannot pay. You build a case file. Not because you are going to sue them, but because when the explosion happens, and it will happen, you need a shield. And third," she looked up, her eyes hard, "you cut the supply lines. I spent the next 3 weeks living a double life. By day, I was the dutiful daughter. I answered my mother's calls. I listened to her talk about how exciting Thanksgiving was going to be. I nodded when my father complained about the pool pump. I played the role of the oblivious ATM. By night, I was a forensic accountant in my own life, I logged into the shared accounts, the ones I had set up for household expenses that they never used properly. I traced the transfers. I found the money Grant sent to Brielle via Venmo. It went into her personal checking account, and from there, it went to Sephora, to Nordstrom, to expensive brunches. It never touched the bill pile. I printed it all. I bought a printer specifically for this task because I did not want to do it at work. I organized the papers into binders, the house, the loans, the lies. Then I went deeper. I logged into the credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. I saw inquiries on my report that I did not recognize, credit card applications, a vague inquiry for a home equity line of credit that had been denied because of a signature mismatch. My blood ran cold. They had tried to take a loan out against the equity in the house. My house. I froze my credit immediately. I set up two-factor authentication on every single account I owned. I changed my passwords to random strings of characters that not even I could remember without a manager. I changed my security questions. Mother's maiden name? No longer the real answer. Now it was betrayal. First pet? Now it was freedom. I was locking the doors of my life, one digital key at a time, 4 days before Thanksgiving. I got a call from my father. It was late, past 11 at night. "Isla," he said. His voice sounded thin, raspy. "Dad, is everything okay? Your mother is worried," he said. He did not ask how I was. He went straight to the manipulation. "She is crying. She says you seem distant. She says she feels like you are pulling away." I sat in the dark of my apartment, surrounded by boxes I had already started to pack. "I am just busy with work." "Dad," I lied. "End of the quarter. Brielle is scared too," he continued. "She is facing a big change. We think she might be pregnant. She has not said it officially, but a mother knows, and she is terrified about where they are going to put a baby in this house. She needs to know her big sister has her back." He paused, waiting for me to fill the silence with a promise, waiting for me to say, "Don't worry, I will buy a bigger house." I gripped the phone tight. "Dad," I said, "I am scared too." He paused. "You? What do you have to be scared of? You have everything. You have the job. You have the money. I am scared that I'm 33 years old and I have nothing to show for it but your mortgage receipts." I wanted to say, instead, I said, "I am scared of the future. We all are," he said, dismissing me. "But family protects family. That is how we survive. Do not let us down. Isla, we are counting on you." He hung up. He did not know it, but he had just given me the final push I needed. "We are counting on you." He meant they were counting on my money. The next morning, I drove to Clearwater. I had found the listing online 2 days prior. It was a townhouse in a quiet complex called The Oaks. It was not grand. It was beige. It had a small patio that looked out onto a retention pond where a heron sometimes stood. But it was clean, and it was affordable. I could pay the mortgage on this townhouse and still have money left over for food. Real food. Not instant noodles. I met the realtor at the title company. The paperwork was ready. I signed my name, Isla Simmons. When the keys were placed in my hand, they felt different than the keys Brielle had given me 2 years ago. Those keys had felt like handcuffs. These keys felt like a weapon. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the title company and looked at the deed. It was mine. No one knew about it. No one could claim it. No one could guilt me into giving up the spare room. I drove back to St. Petersburg with the new house keys in my pocket. I went to work. I answered a text from Brielle asking if I could bring 3 bottles of expensive wine to Thanksgiving dinner. "Sure." I texted back, "I will bring the wine." I was not going to bring just the wine. I was going to bring the binder. I was going to bring the truth. I spent the night before Thanksgiving packing the last of my things into my car. I told my landlord I was leaving a month early and paid the penalty. I did not care. I needed to be gone. I stood in my empty apartment, the place where I had hidden from them for years, and I felt a strange sense of calm. I was not angry anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something harder, something clearer. I was ready. Brielle had her script. My parents had their roles. They were preparing a performance for Thanksgiving, a play titled The Sacrifice of Isla. They expected me to play the martyr. They expected me to cry, to resist a little, and then to fold. But they did not know that I had rewritten the ending. I looked at the envelope containing the deed to the Clearwater townhouse. I looked at the binder filled with bank statements and the paralegal's notes. I put them both into my large tote bag. Tomorrow, I would walk into that house. I would eat their turkey. I would listen to their announcements. And then, I would introduce them to the stranger I had become. I pulled into the driveway of the house on Elm Street, my house on Elm Street, and immediately realized I had made a tactical error. I had assumed this would be a family dinner. I had assumed it would be the 5 of us, maybe a few cousins. The usual suspects gathered around a turkey to dissect the year's failures and successes. I was wrong. The driveway was not just full, it was a parking lot. There were cars jumped up on the curb. There was a sleek black Lexus parked diagonally across the lawn. Crushing the St. Augustine grass, I paid a landscaper $150 a month to maintain. I had to park my sedan 3 houses down, in front of a neighbor's mailbox, and walk back. As I approached the front door, I could hear the hum of voices vibrating through the stucco. It sounded less like a Thanksgiving dinner and more like a cocktail hour at a mid-tier country convention center. I opened the door and walked into a wall of noise. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of cinnamon brooms, expensive perfume, and roasting meat. But underneath the holiday potpourri, there was that familiar, stale smell of pretense. There were at least 40 people inside. I stood in the foyer, clutching the 3 bottles of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon Brielle had requested, bottles that cost me $80 each, and scanned the room. I recognized maybe a third of the faces. There was my mother's entire prayer circle from the First Baptist Church, women with hair sprayed into helmets and eyes that scanned the room for sins to gossip about. There was a cluster of Brielle's friends from her influencer phase, girls who looked like they were filtered even in real life, holding wine glasses and laughing too loudly at things that were not funny. And then there were people I did not know at all, men in blazers, women in cocktail dresses, looking around the living room with appreciative nods. My stomach twisted. This was not a dinner. This was a production. Brielle was in the center of the living room. Naturally, she was wearing a cream-colored dress that flowed loosely around her midsection, a strategic choice. I realize now, she was holding court, gesturing with a champagne flute filled with sparkling cider, while Grant stood slightly behind her, nodding like a well-trained accessory. "Isla!" The voice cut through the chatter. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron that looked brand new, pristine white without a single grease stain. She rushed over and hugged me, but it was one of those air hugs where her body didn't actually touch mine. Terrified of wrinkling her outfit or smearing her makeup, "You made it!" she exclaimed, loud enough for the nearby group to hear. "We were worried you were working late again. You know how Isla is," she said, turning to a woman I did not recognize. "Married to her laptop. We have to beg her to come to see her family." The woman smiled pityingly at me. "Well, it is good you could make time for what is important," she said. I smiled back. It was a tight, plastic smile. "I wouldn't miss it." I made my way toward Brielle. She saw me coming and paused her conversation, turning her body so that the group she was talking to had to turn as well. I was on display. "Hey, sis," she said. Her eyes flicked to the wine bottles in my arms. "Oh, you brought the wine. Great." She didn't reach for them. She didn't say thank you. She just gestured vaguely toward the dining room. "Just put them on the sidebar. The bar cart is already full." "It is good to see you too." "Brielle," I said, keeping my voice level. "You look glowing." She preened. "I feel amazing. Really. Just full of life." She winked at her friends, and they all dissolved into giggles, as if they were sharing a joke I was too dull to understand. I walked over to the sidebar and set the bottles down. As I did, I heard Brielle's voice float over the noise. "Yeah, Isla is sweet," She tries, but she is just very corporate, very rigid. I keep telling her she needs to open her heart more, be more generous with her spirit. And her wallet, someone whispered, and the group laughed again. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck, but I forced it down. Do not react, I told myself. Do not give her the satisfaction. I looked for a place to retreat. I scanned the room for a friendly face and found one near the patio door. Aunt Corinne. She was standing alone, holding a glass of bourbon, neat, no ice, and watching the room with the detached skepticism of a homicide detective at a crime scene. She saw me and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. I made my way over to her, weaving through the crowd. Quite a turnout, Corinne said dryly as I reached her. I counted 42 heads. I didn't know your sister knew this many people who weren't creditors. Who are they? I asked, keeping my voice low. I don't recognize half of them. Audience, Corinne said. She took a sip of her bourbon. Brielle didn't invite guests. Isla, she invited witnesses. It is harder to say no to a pregnant woman when 40 people are watching you. I felt the weight of the envelope in the inside pocket of my blazer. It pressed against my ribs like a hidden gun. She is going to do it tonight, isn't she? I asked. Oh, absolutely, Corinne said. She has been dropping hints all night. Big news. Life changes. Needing more space, she has primed this crowd to erupt in applause the second she opens her mouth. And once they are clapping, you are trapped. If you say no, you are the monster who ruined the celebration. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. It was a text from Corinne, even though she was standing right next to me. Eat, observe, don't react. Let her build the tower. It will make the fall more spectacular. I looked up at her. She winked, a slow, deliberate movement. Go find your seat, she said aloud. I think they are starting to herd us toward the trough. The dining room table had been extended with 2 folding tables covered in matching linens to create one long, banquet-style setup. It dominated the room. I walked along the edge of the table, looking for my name card. I expected to be near the family. I expected to be, if not at the head, at least in the middle. I walked past the head of the table. There was a card for Brielle, a card for Grant. To their right, my mother and father. To their left, the pastor from my mother's church and his wife. I kept walking. I walked past Brielle's best friends. I walked past a cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years. I found my name card at the very end of the table. Squeezed into the corner near the kitchen door, I was seated next to a woman named Mrs. Higgins, whom I vaguely remembered as a neighbor from 3 streets over, and a teenage boy who was glued to his Nintendo Switch. The symbolism was so blunt, it was almost funny. I was the financier, the foundation, the one who made the roof over their heads possible, and I was seated in the servants' quarters. I pulled out my chair and sat down. From this vantage point, I could see the entire length of the table. I could see Brielle at the far end, looking like a queen presiding over her court. She was laughing, touching Grant's arm, leaning in to whisper to the pastor. She looked powerful. She looked secure. I reached into my pocket and touched the corner of the envelope again. Inside that envelope was a copy of the deed to the townhouse in Clearwater. There was a printout of the mortgage payment history for this house, showing every single dollar I had transferred. There was a notice of listing that I had drafted but not yet published. And there was a letter from the escrow company confirming my new purchase. I ran my thumb over the paper. Brielle thought she was trapping me. She thought she had constructed a social prison where shame would force me to comply. She thought that if she announced her pregnancy and her demand for a new house in front of 40 people, I would be too embarrassed to refuse. I would smile, I would nod, and I would write the check later to avoid a scene. She had bet everything on my compliance. She had bet on the Isla who ate the birthday cake with no name. She had clicked bet on the Isla who paid for the breaks and the vacations and the furniture. But that Isla was not sitting at this table. The noise level rose as people found their seats. My mother stood up, tapping a spoon against her glass. The sound was thin and sharp. Everyone! Everyone! Please! She called out, beaming. If we could all take our seats, we have so much to be thankful for tonight. The room quieted down. 40 faces turned toward the head of the table. 40 pairs of eyes fixed on my mother, and then on Brielle. I sat in my corner. Mrs. Higgins turned to me. "Your sister is just lovely," she whispered, spraying a few crumbs of bread roll onto the tablecloth. "And this house, it is just magnificent. Your parents must be so proud to own such a beautiful place." I looked at Mrs. Higgins. I looked at the chandelier that I had paid for when the old one broke. I looked at the curtains I had purchased because my mother said the old ones were depressing. "Yes," I said softly, "it is a beautiful house." "Do you live nearby?" Mrs. Higgins asked. "I live in transition," I said. My mother began the prayer. It was long and performative, thanking God for health, for prosperity, for the bonds of family that can never be broken. She prayed for abundance. She prayed for open hearts and open hands. I kept my eyes open. I watched Brielle during the prayer. She wasn't praying. She was scanning the table, checking the sightlines. She was making sure everyone was watching. She looked down the long expanse of linen and crystal, all the way to the end, and her eyes locked on mine. She smiled. It was a small, triumphant smile. It said, "I have you." She thought I was exiled to the edge of the frame. She didn't realize that the person at the back of the room is the only one who can see the whole stage. "Amen," the room chorused. "Amen," I whispered. Platters of food began to circulate. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, green bean casserole. The smells were overwhelming now, mixing with the heat of 40 bodies in a room designed for 20. I took a small scoop of potatoes. I took a slice of turkey. I poured myself a glass of water. My phone buzzed again. "Corinne, she is waiting for the lull before dessert. That is when she will drop it. Be ready." I took a sip of water. My hands were steady. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm. I looked around at the guests. They were eating, laughing, oblivious. They were extras in a play they didn't know was a tragedy. They thought they were here for a baby announcement. They didn't know they were here for an eviction. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of the scene anymore. 2 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have died of mortification if my family fought in public. I would have done anything to keep the peace. But peace purchased with your own dignity is not peace. It is surrender. I took a bite of the turkey. It was dry. Let them watch. I thought, let the church ladies and the influencers and the neighbors watch. Let them see what happens when the ATM develops a glitch. Let them see what happens when the good daughter decides to rewrite the script. Brielle leaned over and whispered something to Grant. He nodded, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He looked nervous, but Brielle looked ecstatic. She placed her hand on her stomach, a gesture so theatrical it belonged on Broadway. The stage was set. The audience was captive. The actors were in place. I slipped my hand into my pocket and gripped the envelope one last time. "Okay, Brielle," I thought. Action. The clinking of a fork against a crystal wine glass is a sharp, distinct sound. In a room filled with 40 people, it cuts through the laughter and the chatter like a knife through a taut string. Brielle stood up. She smoothed the front of her cream-colored dress, her movements slow and deliberate, ensuring that every eye in the room had time to find her. The conversation died down in waves, starting from the center of the table and rippling out to the corners where the strangers sat. Grant stood up beside her, placing a hand on the small of her back. He looked sweaty, his smile fixed and rigid, like a man who had been told exactly where to stand and what facial expression to wear. "Family, friends, loved ones," Brielle began, her voice pitching up into that breathless, teary register she reserved for high-stakes manipulation. "Thank you all for being here. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, and this year, Grant and I have 3 times the reasons to be grateful." She paused. She looked at our mother, then at our father, and finally, she cast a gaze over the room that was pure theater. "We went to the specialist yesterday," she said, letting a single tear slip down her cheek. "We are not just having a baby, we are having triplets." For a second, there was silence. Then, the room exploded. It was a cacophony of shrieks and applause. My mother let out a wail of ecstasy, clapping her hands over her mouth as if she were witnessing a resurrection. My father puffed out his chest, nodding at the men around him, accepting handshakes as if he had personally engineered the biology involved. Phones came out instantly. Flashes popped. People were recording, streaming, capturing the miracle for their feeds. 3, someone shouted from the back. A triple blessing. Brielle beamed. Basking in the noise, she looked like a queen on a balcony, soaking in the adoration of her subjects. She let it go on for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to build the energy, but not so long that it started to fade. Then, she raised her hand for silence. But, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was amplified by the sudden quiet. With 3 babies coming, and Grant and me, and Mom and Dad, this house is going to be a little cozy. She turned. Her body pivoted slowly until she was facing the far corner of the table. Facing me, the crowd followed her gaze. 40 heads turned. I felt the weight of their eyes. 80 pupils dilated with curiosity and wine, pressing against me. So, Brielle said, her smile widening into something that looked like love but felt like a bear trap. Isla is going to buy us a bigger house. She said it as a statement of fact, not a question, not a request, a prophecy. A ripple of laughter went through the room. It was that warm, knowing laughter of a group that understands the dynamic. Oh, look at the good sister. Look at the provider. Isn't it funny how she pays for everything? Isla always takes care of us, my mother chirped from her seat, dabbing her eyes. She is our rock. Bigger house, a cousin shouted, raising his beer. To Isla. Brielle reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a keychain. It was a gaudy thing, heavy with fake gold charms and an oversized tassel. She walked down the length of the table, her hips swaying, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. She stopped right in front of me. She dropped the keys into my hand. They were warm from her pocket. We need to start looking this week. Sissy, she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. I made a list, 4 bedrooms minimum, a fenced yard for the kids, maybe a pool heater, and close to Mom, obviously. I cannot be driving across town with 3 infants. She stood there, waiting. She was waiting for the submission. She was waiting for me to look down, to blush, to mutter, okay, and tuck the keys into my purse. She was waiting for the public pressure to weld my wallet shut around her desires. The room was silent now. Watching. They were waiting for the hug. They were waiting for the, I am so happy for you speech. I looked at the keys in my palm. I looked at the cheap gold plating, already chipping at the edges. I looked at Brielle's manicured nails. I placed the keys on the tablecloth. I did it gently, with the precision of someone deactivating a bomb. I pushed them 2 inches away from my plate, crossing the invisible border between my space and the public domain. Congratulations on the babies. Brielle, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough to carry to the back of the room without shouting. Brielle smiled, leaning in to hug me, assuming the deal was sealed. But, I said, she stopped. She froze mid-lean. I have actually already found a house, I said. Brielle's eyes lit up. The tension in her shoulders dropped. She turned back to the crowd, throwing her arms up. See? I told you. She is always 1 step ahead. She already found one. The room erupted again. My mother clapped her hands together. Oh, praise God. Where is it? Isla? Is it the one on Shore Drive? I waited for the applause to die down. I waited until the silence returned. Heavier this time, confused by my lack of enthusiasm. It is in Clearwater, I said clearly. Brielle frowned. Her smile faltered, the corners twitching. Clearwater? Isla. That is 40 minutes away. That is way too far for Mom to drive to help me. Why would you look in Clearwater? I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. The water was cold. It felt good against the heat rising in my chest. I did not look in Clearwater for you, Brielle, I said. I set the glass down. I looked in Clearwater for me. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash, before the screaming starts. What? Brielle whispered. Her face went slack. I bought the house, I said. I closed on it 3 days ago. The movers are coming tomorrow morning. I am moving out. For a moment, nobody moved. It was as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Moving out? My father repeated, his voice booming from the other end of the table. What are you talking about? You live here. This is the family house. Actually, I said. It is not. I turned my head slightly to the left. Aunt Corinne? Corinne stood up. She did not look at the family. She looked at the paper in her hands, the envelope I had given her before dinner. She put on her reading glasses, the movement deliberate and professional. She looked like a judge about to deliver a verdict. This is a warranty deed, Corinne read, her voice dry and authoritative. Dated 2 years ago, recorded in the official records of Pinellas County. She looked up over her glasses. Grantor, the Sunshine State Real Estate Group, grantee, Isla Marie Simmons. She flipped the page. Mortgage note. Principal amount, $650,000. Borrower, Isla Marie Simmons. Co-borrowers, none. Corinne looked at the room. There is no family house, she said. There is Isla's house, and she has been the sole financier of this property since the day the papers were signed. My mother's face went the color of ash. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Isla, she stammered. Her voice was trembling. You really kept it in your name? I looked at my mother. I saw the genuine shock in her eyes. It wasn't that she didn't know. She had been there at the closing. It was that she had successfully rewritten history in her own mind. She had told herself the lie so many times that she had started to believe the deed had magically changed to reflect her feelings. You asked me to, I said. You told me it was temporary. You told me you did not want your bad credit to affect the interest rate. You said as soon as Dad's pension cleared. We would refinance. I paused. That was 2 years ago. Mom, the pension cleared 18 months ago. You never brought up the refinance. You just brought up new furniture. The guests were exchanging looks. The influencers had lowered their phones. The church ladies were staring at their plates. This was not the script they had been promised. Brielle's face turned a violent shade of red. She looked at the keys on the table, then at me. She realized her stage was collapsing. I am pregnant, she screamed. The sound tore through the room, shrill and desperate. She slammed her hand on the table. I am carrying 3 babies. How can you talk about paperwork right now? How can you be so selfish? She looked around the room, rallying her troops. She is kicking out a pregnant woman, Brielle yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. My own sister! She is throwing us on the street! A murmur went through the crowd. I saw a few sympathetic glances cast toward Brielle. The narrative was trying to reassert itself. The cruel sister, the poor mother. I stood up. I did not shout. I did not cry. I smoothed my napkin on the table. I am not kicking you out, I said. I am simply leaving. It is the same thing, Brielle shrieked. We cannot pay the mortgage on this place. You know that. If you stop paying, we lose the house. That, I said, is a conversation you should have had with Grant. I looked at Grant. He was staring at the tablecloth, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Since Grant has been contributing $1,500 a month to the house fund for the last year, I said. Grant's head snapped up. Brielle froze. What? My mother asked. She looked at Grant, then at Brielle. What house fund? The one in the envelope on the kitchen counter, I said. The one Brielle collects. If that money had been going to the mortgage, you would have $18,000 in equity by now. You could refinance. You could afford this place without me. I looked at Brielle. Her mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. But you don't have $18,000, do you? Brielle? I asked softly. I turned back to the room. I am not a monster, I said to the silent audience. I have paid every bill for this house for 24 months. I have paid for the roof repairs. I have paid for the landscaping you parked your cars on. I have paid for the food you are eating right now. I picked up the envelope from the table, the one with the deed to my new townhouse. But Brielle is right. A growing family needs space, and I need space too. I looked my sister in the eye. Being pregnant is a blessing, Brielle, but being pregnant does not turn a mortgage document into a fairy tale. It does not erase debt, and it does not obligate me to be your landlord, your banker, and your doormat for the rest of my life. You are ruining everything, Brielle sobbed, tears finally spilling over, real ugly tears of panic. You are ruining my life. No, I said. I am giving it back to you. You wanted to be the head of the household? You wanted the master bedroom? You wanted the credit? I gestured to the room, to the house, to the parents, sitting in stunned silence. It is all yours, Brielle, all of it, the house, the bills, the glory. I turned to my father. He was slumped in his chair, looking old and defeated. I will send the movers for my furniture at 8 in the morning, I said. I have already paid the utilities through the end of the month. That gives you 3 days to transfer them into your name. Isla, my father whispered. Please. Goodbye, Dad, I said. I walked away from the table. I walked past the staring guests. I walked past the sidebar with the $80 wine bottles. I walked to the front door and opened it. The night air outside was cool and fresh. It smelled of rain and exhaust, not cinnamon and lies. Behind me, I heard Brielle start to scream again. A high, thin sound of a child who realizes the tantrum isn't working. I heard my mother crying. I heard the confused murmur of 40 people trying to figure out how to leave without making eye contact. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. The latch clicked. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I had my hand on the brass handle of the front door, the metal cold against my palm. The silence of the night air was inches away. I could have stepped out. I could have walked to my car, driven to Clearwater, and never looked back. But just as the latch began to click, a voice cut through the chaos inside. It was not a scream. It was not a sob. It was a question, low and terrifyingly hollow. Wait, it was Grant. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I stood there, caught between the freedom of the exit and the gravity of the disaster unfolding behind me. Wait, Grant repeated, his voice louder this time, cracking with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. You said this house belonged to your parents. I turned back. The scene in the dining room had shifted. The tableau of the happy family had dissolved into something jagged and ugly. Grant was standing up, his chair pushed back so hard it had tipped over onto the floor. He was looking at Brielle, not with the adoration he had shown 10 minutes ago, but with the disoriented stare of a man looking at a stranger he had been sleeping next to for 3 years. Brielle was frozen. Her face was a mask of panic, her eyes darting between me and Grant. It is their house in spirit, Brielle shouted, her voice shrill. Isla just put her name on the paper for the loan. It is a technicality. Grant, why are you listening to her? She is just trying to ruin our night. Grant looked at me, then he looked at my parents. My mother was staring at her napkin, shredding it into tiny white confetti. My father was pouring more wine into his glass, his hand shaking so badly that the red liquid was splashing onto the white tablecloth like drops of blood. A technicality? Grant asked. He pointed a trembling finger at the envelope lying on the table, the one Corinne had opened. That deed says she owns it. That mortgage statement says she pays for it. You told me your parents owned this outright. You told me we were moving in to help them because they were getting old, not because we were broke. Grant, baby, listen to me, Brielle pleaded, reaching for his arm. He flinched away from her touch. Corinne, who had remained standing like a statue of justice amidst the wreckage, flipped a page in her binder. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. It is not just the mortgage, Corinne said. Her voice was calm, conversational, which made it infinitely more damaging. She looked at the binder, then at the guests who were now watching with the morbid fascination of drivers passing a pileup. The kitchen renovation from last year? Corinne read, the farmhouse sink, the quartz countertops, the one Brielle posted on Instagram with the caption, "My design, my treat?" Corinne lifted a sheet of paper, paid for by check number 4022, drawn from the account of Isla Simmons. Amount, $12,400. Grant's jaw tightened. The new roof? Corinne continued. Relentless. $15,000. Paid by credit card, ending in 8890, cardholder, Isla Simmons. She looked at Brielle over the rim of her glasses. Even the nursery paint you bought last week. Corinne added, $200, charged to the emergency household card, which, again, is funded entirely by Isla. Brielle let out a noise that was half gasp, half shriek. Stop it! You are violating my privacy. You have no privacy when you are spending stolen money, Corinne said simply. The room was buzzing now. The guests were whispering, exchanging looks. The illusion of the Golden Simmons family was not just cracking, it was shattering into dust. Then, from the quiet end of the table, a voice spoke up. It was Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor. She looked confused. Her brow furrowed as she looked at Brielle's stomach. I do not understand, Mrs. Higgins said. Her voice was small but piercing. You said you are having triplets? Yes, Brielle snapped, seizing the opportunity to play the victim. I am having 3 babies, and my sister is kicking us out. Mrs. Higgins adjusted her glasses. But you said you went to the doctor yesterday. If you are carrying triplets, that is a high-risk pregnancy, extremely high risk. My daughter had twins, and they had her on a bi-weekly monitoring schedule from week 8. Why hasn't the doctor scheduled you for a specialist follow-up until next month? It was a small question, a logistical question, but it hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brielle blinked. The color drained from her face, leaving her rouge standing out like clown paint. Well, every pregnancy is different. Brielle stammered. Her confidence was gone, replaced by a frantic, cornered look. We are looking into specialists. We just found out. Grant turned to her slowly. You told me the doctor said everything was perfect. He said, you told me we did not need to go back for 4 weeks. I looked at Grant. I saw the realization hitting him. He was doing the math. He was replaying the conversations, the vague updates, the ultrasound pictures he had never actually seen printed out, only flashed on a phone screen. Isla, Brielle cried out, pivoting back to me, desperate to change the subject. How can you let them interrogate me like this? I am your sister. I am pregnant. Who attacks a pregnant woman? Who does that? She burst into tears, loud, heaving sobs that shook her shoulders. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. It was designed to trigger the protective instinct of everyone in the room. It was designed to make me the villain. Look at her, my mother wailed. Finally finding her voice, you are upsetting the babies. Isla, have you no heart? For a moment, the room wavered. I saw a few people look at me with disapproval. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should have waited. But then I remembered the text messages. I remembered the ledger. I remembered the 10 years of silence. I walked back to the table. I did not sit down. I stood next to Corinne. I am not attacking you. Brielle, I said, I am clarifying the timeline. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I placed it on the table in front of Grant. This is the listing agreement for the house. I said, I signed it 3 weeks ago. I pointed to the date. November 7th. I pulled out another paper. This is the offer letter for my townhouse in Clearwater. Accepted October 29th. I looked at Grant, then at Brielle. I decided to sell this house and move out a month before you announced this pregnancy. I said, I did not do this because of the babies. I did this because I could no longer afford to support 4 adults on one salary. I turned to Brielle. Your pregnancy does not change the past. Brielle, and it does not change the math. I initiated this exit before I knew about the triplets. So do not stand there and tell these people I am reacting to your news. I am reacting to your history." Grant picked up the papers. He read the dates. He looked at the signatures. "November," he whispered. "You were planning this for a month?" "Yes," I said. "And you knew?" Grant asked, looking at my parents. My father looked away. My mother bit her lip. They suspected. I said, "That is why they pressured you to announce the pregnancy tonight. They thought if you made a public scene, I would be too ashamed to go through with the sale. They used your unborn children as a human shield to protect their lifestyle." Grant looked like he was going to be sick. He ran a hand over his face, pressing his fingers into his eyes. "Wait," he said. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "The money." He turned to Brielle. "The $1,500. He said, "The money I send you every first of the month. You said you were giving it to Isla for the mortgage. You said that was our rent." Brielle took a step back. "Grant, do not do this here. Not in front of everyone." "Where is the money?" "Brielle?" Grant asked. His voice was rising. "That is $18,000 a year. If Isla didn't get it, where is it? I spent it on the house." Brielle screamed. "On groceries. On things we needed." Grant reached out. "Give me your phone." "No." Brielle clutched her phone to her chest. "Give it to me," Grant roared. The room was deadly silent. The influencers were not recording anymore. This was too real. Too raw for social media. This was the ugly, unvarnished disintegration of a life. Grant lunged forward and grabbed the phone from Brielle's hand. She tried to pull away, her fingernails clawing at his arm. But he was stronger. He wrestled it free. He unlocked it. He knew her passcode. He opened the banking app. He scrolled. His eyes moved left to right, scanning the lines of transactions. "Sephora, $300. Grant read aloud. "Nordstrom, $450. Ticketmaster, $600. He looked up at her. Betrayal written in every line of his face. "There is no mortgage payment," he said. "There isn't even a utility bill." He kept scrolling. Then he stopped. He frowned. "What is this?" he asked. He held the phone up. "Transfer, $2,500. Sunset Palm Rentals. Deposit." He looked at Brielle. "You rented an apartment?" Brielle said nothing. She was shaking. Her arms wrapped around herself. Grant tapped the screen again. He opened the transaction details. Reference: security deposit, Unit 4B. Tenant: Darlene Simmons. The air left the room. Grant looked at my mother. "Darlene?" he asked. "Why are you renting an apartment?" My mother looked up, her eyes wide and wet. She looked like a child caught stealing candy. We were just worried," she stammered. "We knew Isla was getting difficult. We thought, well, if she kicked us out, we needed a place, just a backup, just in case." Grant looked at the transaction date. "This was 3 months ago," he said. He looked at my father. "You knew?" My father sighed. A heavy rattling sound. "We have to look out for ourselves. Son, Isla has been unpredictable. We needed a safety net. And you used my money to pay for it?" Grant asked. His voice broke. "I have been working double shifts. I have been skipping lunch to save that money. And you used it to rent a backup apartment because you knew you were bleeding Isla dry and she might finally snap?" Grant looked at me. For the first time tonight, there was no anger in his eyes, only a profound, exhausting apology. "I am so sorry." "Isla," he whispered. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." I nodded. "I believe you, Grant." But the twist wasn't over. Corinne cleared her throat. "There is one more thing," she said. She pointed to the transaction on the phone screen that Grant was still holding. "Sunset Palm Rentals," she noted. "That is a 55 and over community." She looked at Brielle. "You cannot live there." "Brielle, no children allowed." Grant froze. He looked at the phone again. "So this wasn't for us?" he asked. "This wasn't a backup for the family?" He looked at Brielle. "You were moving your parents out?" Brielle stayed silent, but her silence was a confession. "You were going to move them out," Grant realized, his voice rising in disbelief. "You were going to use my money to stash them in a retirement condo, And then what? You were going to try to keep this house for yourself? He looked around the sprawling living room. You wanted the big house, he said. You wanted Isla out. You wanted your parents out. You wanted to be the lady of the manor. Brielle finally spoke. Her voice was small, vicious. I deserve it, she hissed. I am the one having the babies. I am the one giving them grandchildren. Isla has nothing. She is alone. She doesn't need 4 bedrooms. She turned to me, her face twisted with a lifetime of jealousy. You are just a bank account. Isla, she screamed, that is all you are. You think you are better than us because you have the money. But you are empty. You have no one. We are the family. You are just the one who pays for it. The words hung in the air, vibrating with cruelty. I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had shared a room with, the sister I had worshipped when we were little. I looked at my parents, who were looking at the floor, unable to defend me because deep down, they agreed with her. To them, I was not a person. I was a resource. I was a vein of gold they had been mining for 30 years, and now that the mine had collapsed, they were angry at the rocks. I walked over to the table. I picked up my purse. I looked at the 40 strangers in the room. They were not looking at their phones anymore. They were looking at us with a mixture of horror and pity. I looked at my mother. You heard her. Mom, I said. I looked at my father. You heard her. Dad, I turned back to Brielle. You are right. Brielle, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I don't have 3 babies. I don't have a fiancé. I looked at Grant. At least, not one who steals from me. I took a breath. But I have something you don't have, I said. I held up the keys to my new townhouse. I have my name on the deed, and I have the truth. I looked at the entire table. You do not need me as a daughter. I said, you do not need me as a sister. You need me as a source. I dropped the listing agreement on top of the turkey platter. The gravy stained the paper brown. The source is dry, I said. I turned to Grant. Check your credit report. Grant, I said softly, if she used your money for the apartment, she probably used your social security number for something else. Grant went pale. I turned and walked to the door. This time, no one stopped me. This time, the silence wasn't waiting for a punchline. It was the silence of a structure that had finally, completely collapsed under the weight of its own rot. I opened the door. I walked out into the night, and as I walked to my car, parked 3 houses down, I heard the sound of shouting erupting from the house behind me. But it sounded distant. It sounded like it was happening on another planet. I got into my car, I locked the doors, and for the first time in my life, I drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. The morning sun over Clearwater did not feel like a spotlight. It felt like a blanket. It was softer, quieter, less demanding than the harsh glare I was used to in St. Petersburg. I stood on the pavement at 8 o'clock in the morning, watching the moving truck back into the driveway of my new townhouse. The move was surgical. I did not have much to take from the apartment I had been renting. I had lived there like a ghost for years, keeping my footprint small, my possessions few, as if I were always prepared to flee. A few boxes of books, my ergonomic desk chair, my clothes, and the expensive espresso machine I had bought myself as a reward for a promotion 3 years ago, the one Brielle had tried to borrow permanently twice. The movers were efficient men who spoke little. They did not know they were moving a woman who had just detonated her entire family structure the night before. To them, it was just furniture. To me, every box they carried across the threshold was a piece of my soul I was reclaiming. I walked into the living room of the townhouse. It was empty, echoing, and smelled of fresh paint and possibility. The walls were a neutral beige, not the chaotic sage green Brielle had forced onto the walls of the big house. There was a sliding glass door that looked out onto a small patio and a retention pond. A white egret was standing in the shallow water, perfectly still. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 33 years, the air in my lungs belonged only to me. My phone, however, was trying to pull me back. It had been vibrating incessantly since 7 in the morning. I had put it on silent. but I could see the screen lighting up on the kitchen counter like a distress beacon. I walked over and looked at it. 7 missed calls from Mom, 4 missed calls from Dad, 12 missed calls from Brielle. And the text messages. They were scrolling down the screen in a frantic cascade. Mom, Isla, please pick up. Your father is having chest pains. You are killing him. Dad, we need to talk. Now. This is childish. Brielle, you think you are so smart? You think you won? You are going to hell for what you did last night. I unlocked the phone. I did not call them back. Instead, I opened the voicemail tab. Brielle had left 5 voice notes. I pressed play on the first one. Ela! Her voice was a ragged scream, distorted by the microphone. Grant left. He took the car, and he left to stay at a hotel. He is asking for a forensic audit. A forensic audit. Isla, do you know what you did? You destroyed my engagement. You jealous, barren bitch. I pressed delete. I played the next one. It was recorded 20 minutes later. Her voice had shifted. It was soft, wet with tears. That terrifyingly childlike tone she used when she wanted to be rescued. Sissy, please, I am scared. The babies. The stress is bad for the babies. I know you didn't mean it. Just call me. We can fix this. Mom said you were just tired. Just come back and we will talk about the house. Please, Isla, I need you. I felt a phantom tug in my chest. That old reflex to fix, to soothe, to pay. It would be so easy to call back. It would be so easy to say, okay, I will pay for 1 more month. Okay, I will fix it with Grant. But then I looked at the white egret outside. It hadn't moved. It was patient. It was self-sufficient. I pressed delete. I did not listen to the rest. I selected them all. Mom's weeping guilts, Dad's stern commands, Brielle's oscillating madness, and I hit the trash icon. Then I went to the deleted folder and emptied it. Gone. I was not going to negotiate my freedom. You do not negotiate with terrorists, and you do not negotiate with family members who hold your love hostage in exchange for a wire transfer. I sat down on the floor, opened my laptop, and connected to the personal hotspot on my phone because the internet guy wasn't coming until Tuesday. It was time for the financial amputation. I logged into the bank portal. The numbers on the screen were black and white, unemotional. I navigated to the bill pay section. First, the mortgage on the St. Petersburg house. It was set to autopay from my primary checking account on the 1st of every month. I clicked Cancel Autopay. A warning box popped up. Are you sure? This may result in late fees. I clicked yes. Next, the utilities, the electric, the water, the gas, the high-speed internet package that included the premium sports channels my father insisted he needed for his heart health. I selected them all. I clicked Remove Account, then the credit cards. I had an emergency card that I had given to my mother years ago for groceries and medicine. I pulled up the recent transaction history. Target, $200. Liquor Barn, $85. Nail Spa, $60. There was no medicine on that list. There were no groceries. I called the number on the back of the card. I navigated the automated menu until I got a human. I am reporting a card lost, I said calmly. Please cancel it immediately and issue a new one to my new address. And please flag the old number for declined transactions. Certainly, Ms. Simmons, the operator said. Is there any fraudulent activity you wish to report? I paused. Fraud implied strangers. Fraud implied a crime committed by someone who didn't know your middle name. No, I said. Just misuse. Close it. When I hung up, I felt lighter. The invisible wires that had been siphoning my energy and my equity were being cut, one by one. But I knew I could not just disappear. That would give them ammunition. That would let them paint me as the daughter who abandoned her sick father. I had to be smarter than that. I had to be professional. I opened my email client. I drafted a message to my father first. Subject: Medical Transport and Care Plan. Dear Dad, I hope you are resting today. I know last night was stressful. Regarding your upcoming cardiology appointments, I am still your daughter, and I still care about your health. I am willing to drive you to and from your appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Please send me the schedule by Sunday evening so I can clear my work calendar. However, moving forward, I will no longer be transferring cash to your accounts for copays or pharmacy runs. If there is a medical bill, please have the provider's billing department email the invoice directly to me. I will pay the provider directly. I will not be providing cash for miscellaneous expenses. I love you, and I want you to be healthy, but my support is now logistical, not financial. Isla. I read it over. It was cold. Yes, but it was bulletproof. If he complained to the relatives that I was neglecting him, I could show them this email. I offered to drive him. I offered to pay the doctors directly. If he refused, it was because he wanted the cash, not the care. Then, I drafted the email to my mother. Subject: Housing Resources and Moving Assistance. Dear Mom, I understand that the situation with the house is changing. As the owner of the property, I will be listing it for sale on the open market in 30 days. This gives you time to make arrangements. To assist you, I have compiled a list of rental properties in St. Petersburg that fit within the budget of Dad's pension and Social Security. I attached a spreadsheet. I had spent an hour the night before researching 2-bedroom apartments, senior living communities, and budget rentals. Additionally, I have contacted a moving company. If you choose one of these locations by the 15th of next month, I will pay the deposit and the movers directly. This is a one-time offer to help you transition. Please let me know which option you prefer. Isla. I hit send. I did not offer them cash. I did not offer them my spare room. I offered them solutions that required them to be adults. I knew they would hate it. They wanted to be rescued. Not assisted, but that was no longer my problem. By noon, the social media war had begun. I was unpacking my kitchen when Corinne texted me a screenshot. Brielle's Facebook status, updated 20 minutes ago. The post was a photo of Brielle, looking teary-eyed, holding her stomach. The caption read, I never thought I would be writing this. You think you know people. You think family is everything. But sometimes, the people closest to you are the most toxic. To be kicked out of your home while pregnant with triplets. I don't wish this pain on anyone. Please pray for us. We are being abandoned by the one person who should have protected us. Toxic. Family narcissist, pray for the triplets, homeless. There were already 50 comments. Oh my God. Honey, who did this? Is this about your sister? I always knew she was cold. How can someone be so heartless? You can stay with us. She didn't mention the $18,000 she stole from Grant. She didn't mention the apartment she rented for Mom behind his back. She didn't mention that the house she was being kicked out of was one she never paid a dime for. She was controlling the narrative by omitting the receipts. My finger hovered over the reply button. I wanted to comment. I wanted to post the photo of the ledger. I wanted to post the deed. I wanted to burn her down with the truth, but I stopped. Corinne's advice rang in my head. Do not react. Let her build the tower. If I argued in the comments, it would just be a family squabble. It would be he said, she said. It would look messy. Instead, I took a screenshot. I captured the post, the timestamp, and the comments. I saved it to a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence, Defamation/Harassment. I did not block her. I needed to see what she was saying. I needed a record of every lie, every threat, every attempt to destroy my reputation. I was not playing for likes. I was playing for a restraining order if it came to that. At 2 p.m, my inbox pinged with a new email. The sender was Grant. My heart rate spiked slightly. Grant was the wild card. He was a victim in this too, but he was also desperate. I opened the email. Subject: The Truth. Isla. I am at a motel on Highway 19. I have not spoken to Brielle since last night. She keeps telling me I misunderstood, that the money was for the house, that you are lying. I don't know what to believe anymore. My head is spinning. I need to know the truth. Please, if you have documents, send them. I need to know where my money went. Grant. I looked at the screen. I felt a wave of pity for him. He was a decent man who had fallen in love with a mirage. He had worked double shifts to fund a lifestyle that Brielle felt she was entitled to for free. I hit reply. I did not write a long letter. I did not offer comfort. I did not say, "I told you so." I wrote, "Grant. See attached. Isla." I attached 4 PDF files. File 1. The mortgage statement history for the last 24 months, showing 0 external contributions. File 2. My personal bank statements highlighting every single repair, utility bill, and tax payment. File 3. The deed to the house. File 4. A scan of the ledger I had photographed in the envelope on the kitchen counter weeks ago, the one showing his name and the amount of $1,500 next to stroller fund. I sent it. No commentary, no emotion, just the cold, hard math. The math doesn't lie. The math doesn't cry. The math just is. By the time evening settled over Clearwater, I was exhausted. My body ached from lifting boxes, but my mind was strangely clear. I sat on my new patio with a glass of cheap wine, not the $80 bottle I had left at the House of Lies, and watched the sun go down. My phone buzzed. It was Corinne. "Did you survive the first day?" I typed back, "I think so. I feel terrible. But also, good." "Is that wrong?" Corinne's reply came instantly. "It is not wrong. It is recovery. You are not breaking the family. Isla, you are breaking the contract they forced you to sign when you were a child. The one that said you owe them your life in exchange for existing." I looked at the message, the contract. That was exactly what it was. An invisible, unwritten contract that stated my worth was calculated by my utility. If I stopped being useful, I was in breach of contract. Well, I thought, taking a sip of wine, consider the contract void. I looked at my phone one last time before bed. There was a new email notification. It wasn't from family. It was from the HR department at Harborlight Analytics Group. Subject: Security Protocol Update. Hi Isla. Thanks for the heads up regarding potential external harassment. We have flagged your profile. No calls will be put through to your extension without screening, and security has been notified not to admit any visitors matching the descriptions you provided. I had sent that request at 9 in the morning. I was closing every door they could possibly try to kick down. I closed the laptop. I locked the sliding glass door. I turned off the lights. For the first time in years, I did not check my bank account before I went to sleep to make sure there was enough money for someone else's emergency. I just closed my eyes. The silence in the townhouse was deep and heavy. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of safety. And in that silence, I finally slept. The war did not happen with shouting matches in the street. It happened in the quiet, sterile hum of servers and the rustle of legal paper. It happened in the invisible digital spaces where reputations are built and destroyed. On Tuesday morning, 3 days after I left the house, my work phone rang. It was the director of human resources at Harborlight Analytics Group. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. In corporate America, a call from HR is rarely a social check-in. "Isla," she said. Her voice professional but edged with a strange hesitancy. "We received an email this morning. It was sent to the general inbox, but it was flagged because it contained your name and some concerning allegations." I closed my eyes. I knew who it was before she said the name. "It is from a Brielle Simmons." She continued, "She claims to be your sister. She alleges that you are suffering from a mental health crisis, that you are financially unstable, and that you have abandoned a dependent family member in a life-threatening situation. She suggested we review your employment status because you might be a liability." I gripped the edge of my new desk. Brielle had not just tried to guilt me, she had tried to starve me. She knew that my job was the source of the money she felt entitled to, and in her twisted logic, if she couldn't have the money, I shouldn't have it either. She wanted to break the machine because it stopped dispensing cash. "I am aware of this," I said, keeping my voice steady, As per my email to you yesterday, I am currently navigating a complex domestic dispute involving financial extortion. This email is an attempt to leverage my employment to force compliance. There was a pause. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. We have your documentation on file. Isla, the director said finally. Her tone had shifted from investigative to sympathetic. And frankly, the email she sent was unhinged. It was written in all caps and demanded we garnish your wages and send them to a PayPal account. We are disregarding it as spam, but I wanted you to know. Thank you. I said, I appreciate your discretion. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, sharp rage. Brielle had crossed the line between family drama and active warfare. She was trying to destroy my livelihood. I called Corinne immediately. Do it, I said. Are you sure? Corinne asked. Once we send this, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. I thought about the HR director reading an email in all caps demanding my wages. Send it, I said. 2 hours later, a courier delivered a cease and desist letter to the house in St. Petersburg. It was signed by one of the most aggressive litigators in Corinne's firm. It demanded that Brielle Simmons immediately stop all communication with my employer, stop posting defamatory statements on social media, and cease all harassment of Isla Simmons. It stated clearly that any further contact would result in a lawsuit for damages and a petition for a restraining order. It was a slap in the face delivered on heavy, watermarked bond paper. The reaction was immediate, but it did not come from Brielle. It came from my mother. She did not call. She knew I wasn't answering calls. She came to my townhouse. I saw her on the Ring camera I had installed the day I moved in. She was standing on my porch, clutching her purse, looking around nervously as if she expected the police to jump out of the bushes. She looked smaller than I remembered. I debated not answering. I could just sit on my couch and watch her on the screen until she left. But I knew she would just stand there until the neighbors started to stare. And I did not want my new life tainted by her drama. I opened the door, but I left the security chain on. It allowed the door to open only 4 inches. A physical barrier, a boundary made of steel. Isla, she gasped, seeing my face through the crack. Open the door. It is your mother. I can hear you fine from here. Mom, I said. She looked at the chain, hurt flashing in her eyes. It was the look she used to get when I refused to wear the frilly dresses she bought me as a child. Isla, you sent a lawyer to your sister, she whispered, leaning in. A lawyer. Do you know how that looks? Mrs. Higgins called me. She saw the courier. The whole neighborhood is talking. They think we are criminals. You are not criminals, I said, but Brielle is acting like one. She tried to get me fired. Mom, did you know that? My mother waved her hand dismissively. She was just upset. She didn't mean it. She is hormonal. It is the triplets. The triplets. I repeated. Isla, please, my mother said. Her voice dropped to a pleading whine. Just transfer the deed. Just sign the house over to us. We can work out a payment plan later. If you just give us the house, Brielle will calm down. Grant will come back. We can tell everyone it was just a misunderstanding. We can save face. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and read a book, and I realized she cared more about the opinion of Mrs. Higgins than she did about whether her daughter had a job or a roof over her head. Mom, I said, face does not pay the loan. What? She asked. You want to save face? I said, I want to save my credit score. I want to save my future. Those 2 things are not compatible. I am selling the house. The listing goes live on Friday. You can't, she hissed. I can, I said, and I am. I closed the door. I slid the deadbolt home. I watched on the monitor as she stood there for a full minute, staring at the wood, before turning and walking away. That evening, my father emailed me. It was the first time in years he had written me an email that wasn't just a forwarded joke or a link to a car he wanted to buy. Isla, it read, I am sorry. I stared at the screen. Those 3 words were so foreign coming from him that I thought it might be a phishing scam. I am sorry we let it get this far. I am sorry I didn't step in when Brielle took the money from Grant. I should have been stronger. I felt a lump form in my throat. This was what I had wanted. This was the apology I had been craving since I was 10 years old. But then I read the next paragraph. But you have to understand, she is your sister. She is fragile. You have always been the strong one. You are like iron. Isla, she is like glass. Can you not just soften? Just this once? Can you not just let her have the win? For the sake of the babies? The lump in my throat hardened into a stone. He wasn't apologizing for the abuse. He was apologizing for the inconvenience of my reaction to it. He was complimenting my strength only to weaponize it. You are strong, so you can take the pain. She is weak, so she gets the prize. I typed my reply. My fingers hit the keys with precision. Dad, I am not iron. I am just tired. You ask me to soften. I have been soft my whole life. I was soft when I paid for your heart medication. I was soft when I paid for the roof. I was soft when I let Brielle live in my house for 2 years rent-free. Being soft got me robbed. Being soft got me disrespected. I am not softening. I am stabilizing. Isla. Wednesday brought a new development. Grant. He did not come to the townhouse. He respected the boundaries I had set. He called me from a number I didn't recognize. The motel landline. Isla, he said. His voice sounded wrecked, like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. Thank you for the files. You are welcome. I said. I went to the bank, he said. I showed them the transfers. They are launching a fraud investigation. Good, I said. But Isla, there is something else. I waited. I called the obstetrician. He said, the one she claimed we went to. The one she said gave us the due date. And? They have no record of her. Grant whispered. The silence on the line was heavy. I called 3 other clinics in St. Petersburg. Grant continued. Nothing. Isla, I don't think there are triplets. I don't know if there is even a baby. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The Thanksgiving announcement. The urgency. The 3 babies' excuse for needing a bigger house immediately. It was all a fabrication. It was a deadline she had invented to force my hand. She knew I was pulling away. She knew the house was at risk. So she created a crisis so big that I would be a monster if I ignored it. She needed a shield. I said, no one evicts a pregnant woman with triplets. It was the ultimate defense. She is sick, Grant said. His voice broke. She is actually sick. I am sorry. Grant, I said. He hung up. I sat there, processing the depth of the deception. It wasn't just greed. It was a pathology. Brielle believed that if she wanted something enough, reality would bend to accommodate her. And if reality didn't bend, she would break it. But reality was about to snap back. On Thursday, I received a notification from my realtor. The listing for the St. Petersburg house was ready to go live, but before I gave the final approval, I got an email from Brielle. It wasn't screaming, it wasn't begging, it was an invoice. Attached to the email was a PDF document created in a free template. Invoice to Isla Simmons, from Brielle Simmons, services, caregiving for Wade and Darlene Simmons, 24 months. Rate, $30 per hour. Total hours, 4,000 total. Due, $120,000. I stared at the screen, blinking. She was trying to bill me. She was trying to claim that living in my house rent-free, eating my food, and spending Grant's money was actually a job. She was arguing that because she lived with our parents, she was their caregiver, and therefore I owed her back pay that conveniently equaled the down payment on the house she wanted. It was breathtakingly audacious. I did not reply to her. I forwarded the email to Corinne. Add this to the file, I wrote. Then I replied to Brielle. I did not address the invoice directly. I simply wrote, Brielle, I have received your request for compensation. Since you are claiming to be a professional caregiver, please provide your certification, your daily logs of care provided, and the contract signed by me authorizing this employment. In the meantime, I have researched professional home health aides in St. Petersburg. The going rate for a licensed, Insured provider is $25 an hour. I am happy to hire one for mom and dad once the house is sold. They will have a contract, they will have a background check, and they will not be you. Isla. The silence from her end was deafening. She knew I had called her bluff. She wasn't a caregiver. She was a roommate who occasionally drove Dad to the pharmacy if he paid for her gas. Friday morning, the day the listing went live, I woke up to a message from an old friend from high school. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who had been at the Thanksgiving dinner as a friend of the family. Hey Isla. The text read, I saw the for sale sign go up in the yard. I am so confused. Brielle told us at the party that the paperwork was already done for the new house. She told us the closing was next week. That is why she invited so many people. She said it was a farewell to the old house party. Was she lying to all of us? I read the text twice. It wasn't just a demand. It wasn't just a hope. Brielle had already sold the lie to her audience. She had invited 40 people to a housewarming party for a house she didn't own, banking on the fact that her public announcement would force me to make it true. She had leveraged her social circle against my bank account. I texted back, yes, she was lying. The house is for sale. There is no new house. I put the phone down. The end game was approaching. The listing was live. The sign was in the yard. I had scheduled an open house for Sunday. I sent one final email to the family group chat, the one I had muted but not left. The lockbox is on the door. The realtor has the code. The open house is Sunday from 1 to 4. You need to be out of the house during those hours. If you interfere with the showing, if you sabotage the property, or if you refuse to leave, I will have the sheriff enforce the access clause in the deed. This is not a negotiation. This is a transaction. I prepared my townhouse. I checked the locks. I checked the cameras. I knew that when the reality hit them, when strangers started walking through their bedrooms, judging their furniture, measuring their lives, the emotional violence would spike. But I was ready. I had built a fortress of logic, papered with receipts, and fortified with the truth. They wanted a war of feelings. I was giving them a war of facts. And the thing about facts is that they do not care if you are crying. They do not care if you are pregnant with triplets. They simply remain true. I looked at the calendar. The closing date was set for 30 days from now. 30 days until the final signature. 30 days until the check cleared. 30 days until I was just Isla Simmons, unrelated to the debt of being a daughter. The conference room at the escrow office was cold, smelling faintly of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. It was the smell of finality. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, Aunt Corinne next to me, her binder open and ready. On the other side sat the buyers, a nice young couple from Ohio who held hands and looked at the paperwork with the excitement of people who did not know the history of the walls they were buying. And then, the door opened. I had not invited them. The title company had not invited them. But Brielle and my mother, Darlene, walked in as if they were the guests of honor at a coronation. Brielle was wearing oversized sunglasses and a black dress, looking every inch the grieving widow of a life she never actually owned. My mother followed, clutching her purse, her eyes rimmed with red, playing the part of the displaced matriarch to perfection. The escrow officer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said. "This is a private closing, unless you are signatories on the deed. I must ask you to wait in the lobby." Brielle did not sit down. She stood at the end of the table, removing her sunglasses with a theatrical sweep of her hand. "I am not going anywhere," she announced. Her voice was shaky but loud. "I am here to assert my rights. Mr. Henderson looked at me. I stayed silent. I wanted to see how far she would go. "I have rights of residency," Brielle declared, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her bag. "And I have equity claims. I contributed to the renovation of that property. I picked out the tile. I managed the contractors. I created the value in that house. If this sale goes through without my consent, I am suing for unjust enrichment." The young couple from Ohio looked terrified. The husband tightened his grip on his wife's hand. "Isla," my mother said, her voice trembling. Please, do not do this in front of strangers. Just sign the transfer to us. We can fix this. I looked at Corinne. She didn't even look up. She just slid a single document across the table toward Brielle. It was a spreadsheet. This is a comprehensive forensic accounting of every penny spent on the property at 421 Elm Street. Corinne said. Her voice was as dry as parchment. She pointed to the first column. Materials, labor, permits, every single invoice is attached. Every single payment is traced to a bank account ending in 4099. That is Isla's account. Corinne looked at Brielle over her reading glasses. You did not pay for the tile. Brielle, you picked it out. Isla paid for it. You did not manage the contractors. You opened the door for them. Isla paid them. In the state of Florida, taste is not a currency. You have zero financial claim to this asset. Brielle snatched the paper. But I live there. I have squatter's rights. You were a guest, Corinne corrected her, and since you never paid rent, and there was no lease agreement. Your tenancy was at will. The notice to vacate was served 30 days ago. Your rights expired at midnight last night. Brielle looked at the spreadsheet, her face twisting in frustration. She looked for a line, a loophole, anything she could grab onto. But then, Mr. Henderson spoke up. He had been typing on his computer, frowning at the screen. Actually, he said, looking up with a confused expression. There is a flag on the title search that we need to clear up before we can proceed. My stomach tightened. A flag? It appears there was a previous application for a home equity line of credit filed on this property 6 weeks ago. Mr. Henderson said. I frowned. I never applied for a line of credit. Mr. Henderson turned his monitor so we could see. It was an application for $100,000. The paperwork was filled out in detail. Income, employment history, social security number, and at the bottom, a signature. Isla M. Simmons. I stared at the signature. It was good. It was very good. It had the same loop on the S, the same sharp slant on the M. But it wasn't mine. The application was denied. Mr. Henderson said, tapping the screen. It was flagged for potential fraud because the credit file was frozen by the consumer just 24 hours prior to the application date. He looked at me. Did you submit this, Ms. Simmons? I looked at the date on the screen. It was 2 days before I announced I was moving out. It was the same week I had seen the baby fund envelope. No, I said softly, I did not. Mr. Henderson adjusted his tie. Well, that is concerning. This is federal wire fraud. We are obligated to report this. Do you have any idea who might have had access to your personal information and the deed to the house? The room went deadly silent. I did not look at Brielle. I looked at my mother. Darlene was staring at the floor, her hands twisting the strap of her purse so tightly that the leather was squeaking. Her face was pale, a sickly, ghostly white. Mom? I asked. She flinched. It was my mother who got the mail. It was my mother who kept the filing cabinet keys safe. It was my mother who had asked me for my social security number 3 months ago, claiming she needed it for a beneficiary update on her life insurance policy, a policy that probably didn't exist. Darlene? Brielle asked, looking at our mother with genuine confusion. You applied for a loan? My mother began to cry. It wasn't the performative weeping she usually did. This was the terrified sobbing of a woman who had been caught. We needed the money, she choked out. We just needed a bridge. Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Simmons, are you admitting to signing your daughter's name on a loan application? My mother looked up, her eyes pleading with me. Isla, please, she begged. We were going to pay it back. We were. We just wanted to buy the house next door for Brielle, the one with the pool. We were going to use the equity from your house for the down payment, and then you would just keep paying the mortgage like usual. You wouldn't even have noticed. I felt the air leave my lungs. They weren't just going to take the house I lived in. They were going to mortgage it to buy a second house for Brielle. They were going to strap me with another $100,000 of debt so Brielle could have her dream home, and I would be left paying for 2 properties while living in neither. And they would have gotten away with it if I hadn't frozen my credit. Grant, who had been standing silently near the door, I hadn't even noticed him come in, stepped forward. He looked at Darlene with a mixture of horror and disgust. "You were going to frame her?" Grant asked. His voice was a whisper. "You were going to commit a felony and let Isla pay for it?" My mother sobbed harder. "I did it for the family. I did it for the babies." "There are no babies," Grant shouted. The sound made the young couple from Ohio jump. "There are no triplets. Darlene, it was all a lie." He turned to Brielle. "Did you know?" he asked. "Did you know she was forging Isla's signature?" Brielle looked at the screen, then at Mom, then at me. For the first time in her life, she looked small. She looked like a child who realized the game had gone too far. I thought she had permission," Brielle stammered. "Mom said Isla agreed to help." "Liar," I said. I stood up. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I did not sign that document. That is a forged instrument. However, I am not pressing charges today. I just want to sell this house. Can we proceed?" Mr. Henderson looked at me, then at the sobbing woman in the corner. He nodded slowly. "If you sign an affidavit stating the signature is unauthorized and the application is void, we can close," he said. "But Ms. Simmons, this will stay on the record. I don't care." I said, "I just want out." I signed the affidavit. Then I signed the deed. Then I signed the bill of sale. With every stroke of the pen, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just a house I was selling. I was selling the guilt. I was selling the obligation. I was selling the role of the victim. When I put the pen down, the house was gone. The money, the equity I had built over 2 years of sacrifice, would be wired to my account in 24 hours. I stood up and turned to my family. My mother was still crying, hunched over in a chair. Brielle was standing by the window, refusing to look at anyone, and my father, Wade, who had been waiting in the hallway, walked in. He looked at the papers on the table. He looked at his wife, broken and exposed, and then he looked at me. For the first time in my life, he didn't look at me with expectation. He didn't look at me like I was a utility. He looked at me with something that resembled fear. He realized, finally, that I was not the weak one. I was the only thing that had been holding them up. "Isla," he said. His voice was cracked. I walked over to him. "I set up a trust for you this morning." "Dad," I said. He blinked. "What?" I took $50,000 from the sale proceeds. I said, "It is in a managed health savings account. You cannot withdraw cash. You cannot transfer it to Mom. You cannot give it to Brielle. It pays directly to doctors, pharmacies, and hospitals." I looked at Brielle. "Brielle gets nothing," I said. Brielle whipped around. "That is my money. That is my house equity. It is my money," I corrected her, "and I am choosing to use it to make sure Dad doesn't die of a heart attack because you spent his medication money on a new purse." I turned back to my father. "That is it, Dad. That is the end. I will drive you to the doctor. I will make sure the bills are paid from the trust. But I will never, ever hand you cash again. And I will never sit at a table where I am treated like a servant." I looked at Grant. "I am sorry." "Grant," I said, "you deserve better." Grant nodded. He looked at Brielle one last time, then turned and walked out the door. He didn't look back. I walked past my mother. I walked past my sister. I walked out of the escrow office and into the bright, blinding sunshine of the parking lot. Corinne walked beside me. She lit a cigarette, her hands shaking slightly. "That was brutal." She said, "It was necessary." I said, "It is over." She said, "You did it." I drove back to Clearwater. The drive felt different this time. The bridge over the bay sparkled in the sunlight. The radio played a song I didn't know, but I hummed along anyway. When I got to my townhouse, I walked into the kitchen. I opened my purse and took out the old key. The key to the street. Petersburg House. The key Brielle had handed me that night at Thanksgiving. The key that was supposed to lock me into another 30 years of servitude. I walked over to the hook by the door. I hung it up. It wasn't a trophy. It was a tombstone. It was a reminder of the girl I used to be. The girl who thought love was something you had to buy. I sat down on my beige sofa. I looked out at the retention pond. The egret was gone, but the ripples were still there. The silence in the room was absolute. It settled over me like a fine dust, soft and cool. It wasn't lonely. It wasn't empty. It was mine, for the first time in 33 years. The roof over my head, the air in my lungs, and the future in front of me belonged to no one but me. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of my own heartbeat. It was steady, it was strong, and it was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below with your location and share your thoughts on how I handled my family. Did I go too far? Or was it just enough? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lucy Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need the courage to break their own chains.